Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dialogues from Silicon Valley. My name is Vlas Lezen, I'm Chief Operating Officer at Silicon Valley Innovation Center. We continue our discussion on innovation, digital transformation, disruptive technologies, and how to make your businesses better with the various digital tools. Today, we have another guest, RJ Mahadev, who is the head of remote and mobile assets at Cisco. RJ leads Cisco managed IoT gateway business. His focus is on aligning remote and mobile use cases with IoT solutions and developing leading practices for architecting, designing, and integrating these platforms. RJ has spent much of his professional life starting up new business in entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial settings. Roles prior to Cisco include co-founder and managing director of Euro Broadband, where he led the development and operations of WiMAX-based business in Greece. He was also Vice President for Global Product Management at Level 3 Networks, where he was responsible for deploying and managing the world's largest soft switch platform. RJ holds a master's degree in Business Administration and Marketing and Finance from the University of Denver, and is a recognized speaker who has presented at numerous industry and strategy conferences, including SVIC program. So RJ, without further ado, I am switching to you.
Thanks very much, Vilas, for that warm welcome. Really happy to talk to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So without further ado, let's just start talking. Obviously, your experience have been in a lot of innovation with a lot of very cool, very new, very nascent, very transformative technologies. So how do you define the digital transformation for yourself?
So obviously, that's a question. The answer has changed over the years. I've been doing digital transformation here at Cisco for about 12 years now. And when we first started, we always talked about customer use cases and business outcomes, but attaching those to the actual success with pilots and deploying it was always a challenge. And in fact, in IoT, we've seen a high failure rate between things that have been validated in a pilot and things that are commercially deployed. And I think it comes down to three main things. The first thing is the business case. This is something that has to work with today's budgets and today's requirements. It can't be something that promises the future without considering the right now. So that's probably the first piece. The second piece is the organization. I think any kind of transformation involves a different way of making decisions. So budget-light items are shifting from a traditional, where they've traditionally been buying equipment, to a new way of buying equipment. And responsibility for those budgets also shifting. And so some organizations have shifted and are more used to buying things the new way, others aren't. And that really coming together of how the organization culture come together to transform has been the second biggest thing. The technology itself has actually probably been the least important piece of the three. Technologies, yes, they're accelerating, yes, they're constantly changing, but in many ways, when you have the foundational elements, you need to build for a world where your cost to shift to new technologies is variable, and you can do that quickly. And so now there's very good models for that with cloud and with fog computing and a lot of that. Long-winded answer, but hopefully it answers your question.
It definitely did. So something that you have mentioned, I think that is very important. You touched on the several points. So the first one, and let me maybe rephrase it, what you said, right? That IoT is one of those buzzwords that on the one side means everything, but then on the other side, it means very little. And also on top of that, we also have people who get excited about the new technology just for the sake of technology. And that's something that we see over and over again. And in terms of how we look into how technologies can transform our businesses. So from your experience working with your clients, and again, 12 years with Cisco with IoT approach, how do you think that businesses should think about those new technologies, particularly IoT, transforming their business? Where can they find those business cases? Where can they find this application points where this new trending technology can really transform their business, and how should they think about it?
So I know the fashionable word is digitalization and digital transformation. I guess we've also been calling it digital disruption, right? So it is disruption. So what that means is it's positioning you for something new, but some of the stuff that you've enjoyed in the past doesn't work the way you'd like it to work, right? So take the example of cell phones. Cell phones are ubiquitous right now, and most people have done away with their landlines just because of the cell phone, right? But voice quality in a cell phone is actually pretty poor compared to your traditional circuit switch landline, right? So if the primary purpose of a telephone is to have a voice conversation, is that progress for us to shift to a device where the voice conversation is a lot poorer than it was previously, right? And the answer is it's because that device has become a lot more about your voice communication. It's about convenience, having it wherever you are in the world, so you're not going back to a desk. It's about all these other applications and capabilities you're using it for. In fact, I think most people hardly ever speak on their phone, right? If you look at the top 10 things that they do on their phone, actually having a call would probably be, at the bottom of that list, right? But they still want to buy a telephone. They don't want to buy something else. So it's kind of weird that the purpose that you're buying this device for isn't the purpose that you're using it for, right? And that analogy applies with digital transformation as well, right? So it's really important to see what's happening to your business, what your customers are asking for that are different from what you're capable of providing, what your competitors are doing to disrupt you, and what is the platform you need to give them this something new. And as part of that, being willing to say, okay, some of this old stuff that I'm doing isn't going to be as good, but it's going to position me much better for all these new things I want to do. So that's, I think, a lot of the struggle with transformation is getting used to finding which use case will help you kind of do that.
That resonates a lot with what we hear throughout the world. And I think the interesting situation that we have right now is that the digital transformation, the digital disruption, as you said, I think COVID has shown that this is pretty much happens and happens quite quickly. And it's just shown that it is something that not necessarily comes from your competition, but just in general could come and disrupt completely your business. But what I find interesting, and I'm just kind of curious if you see it the same way, that a lot of companies right now, for the obvious reasons, in this survival mode. But then at the same time, I think this crisis showed that we really need to focus on innovation before this disruption happens. So how do you think companies, either in this situation or in general, what you said before, how they can look into transforming their business, switching from that survival, switching from that kind of general business as usual mode to this innovation and self-disruption mode, be it with IoT or other technologies?
That's a really good question, Blas. Maybe, again, let's go back to the cell phone example, right? So take a service like Uber. That really disrupted the whole taxi cab world, right? And the idea that you can, on your cell phone, call a cab, you know exactly where it is, exactly where it's coming. It's paid for. All you need to do is get into it, and then before your destination, if you decide to go somewhere else, you can just get off. That whole idea, and only pay for the time that you're actually traveling, that was so new, right? But that disruption couldn't happen without all of the fundamental platforms, right, that it depends on. So you needed a smartphone store, marketplace that somebody could deploy, could download this easily. You needed the financial systems where somebody could connect their billing systems to it. You needed a cell phone network, so it was easy to connect, and you'd have a strong connection, and you can kind of do this pretty much where you need it, and can give you your location, all of that. You needed all of the technologies that go into the cell phone, right? So it's important when you're picking where and how you want to disrupt, that you're picking areas where you have the foundational technology, right? So you start with the network. That's an easy one because you have to be connected. That's where Cisco plays, and we played well, and we fully understand that space, right? So assuming you have the network in place, right? How else are you connecting? Is there some kind of a cellular network you're connecting to? How are you getting from that edge device to that application? And once you have that available in a way that you can buy it in sort of a low-cost way, then you can start thinking about what are the applications you can buy from a marketplace that will help you do, let's say, with COVID that'll help you do better social distancing. In fact, we see a lot of our mass transit customers, they now have a new mandate for maintaining social distancing on their buses. So now they need that information on how many passengers they have on a bus and how the passengers spread out in the vehicle. And they need that to drive if they're bringing a new bus into the route. But because we now have buses that are connected with really strong onboard gateways from Cisco, and we have application providers that are providing these SaaS services to our transit customers, it's really easy to say, how do we pull in some kind of passenger counting information into that so we can provide that report to the customer. So you've got to make sure that the foundational elements and the building blocks are there, rather than taking on something where that foundation doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's very important to actually be able to build on something, right? As I said, if you don't have buses, if you don't have ability to connect those buses, it's really hard to do anything with the information on that bus, right? It's very deterministic to the success of this enterprise. But maybe pivoting a little bit towards the Cisco case. So let's say that I am a big maybe transportation company. Let's say, just for example, let's say that I'm some kind of business logistics company. And I come to, let's say, URJ, and I say, I heard about this IoT thing. IoT thing is great. I just want to make it better for my business. Help me do it. So what would be your kind of thought process of trying to address person who have their own business with the commercial logistics, with the freight logistics? And how would you approach kind of design thinking and just thinking process for the company on how would you analyze a particular case for them?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up design thinking. I think that's sort of one of the fundamental practices that are required in order to do this well. So as you think about your traditional design thinking principles, you've got to start with really sort of empathizing with the users and defining the use case, right? So before you do anything else, before you think about the technology, think about, what do my customers want? Maybe have some surveys with them. What are the alternatives that they're getting from some of my competitors and substitutes? And how do I want to define or change my business to give my customers more of what they want, right? And that's something you do by talking to customers and going through a whole creativity process. Once you have a view for that, pick your top 2 or 3 goals and then go into execution mode. Ideate on how you're going to resolve that. Especially important is the partner ecosystem, right? So the big thing about digital transformation and IoT is that it's no longer this old world where one company can provide everything. The underlying theory of why it works is because you're buying modular capabilities from different providers that you're mixing and matching. So this way you're not stuck with a single provider, and this way you can innovate very quickly. So make sure you've got an ecosystem of your different providers, large companies like Cisco. It's really important for us to work with startups that are doing applications. So a lot of the time I'm working with, the VCs that run these startups and the CXOs for these startups, talking about where they want to take their business and how jointly we can address these use cases, right? And then we run prototypes and we test it. And then we learn from that test. And it's something that I like to say, that failure is not the opposite of success. The opposite of success is not learning from your tests and not figuring out how to do something better. As long as you're doing that execution, fail fast, fail often, sort of Silicon Valley mantra, I think you really figure out how you can do something new and different.
That definitely resonates with some of my approaches that I use in our business, and a little bit curious about your perspective on this. So when I try to talk to my customers, one of the things that I face is that people often don't know what is possible. So they have some kind of understanding that they have some kind of the mandate that they have built into their thinking, into their plans, into their budgets of what they need to do. But then at the same time, I find out that they often don't know what is actually possible, and therefore it does not come to them immediately. And they all often focus on the solution that they're trying to solve through the mandate, rather than rather than identify the problem, solve the problem. So how I usually approach is that I say, if I gave you a magic wand, that you would not have any kind of restrictions, any kind of limitations on your budgets, on your buy-ins, what would you do? And that usually gives me a better understanding of what people really want and what real problems they have, rather than the budgets that or mandate that they might have. Have you experienced that with working with your customers, that usually it takes a little bit of shifting of the perspective with them to actually find this particular pain point and tell them that something is possible? Again, going back to your system comment.
Yeah. That, you're asking a lot of really good questions here. And so as I said, I've been doing IoT here at Cisco for a long time, longer than I care to admit, right? And we've made a lot of mistakes along the way, right? And we've done things that haven't worked. And so when we started out, we were like really excited about the technology. And we talk to customers about how great this technology is. But, to your point, nobody buys technology, right? People buy an answer to their problem. And I think at the point where we are right now, where digital transformation has been around for long enough, there's great examples of success, right? So it's going back to what William Gibson said. The future is here. It's just not spread equally, right? So find an example of a competitor or somebody in your business in a different market that's doing something that you think would really work with your customers in your market. Talk to your customers and don't reach too far. If this is something where you find yourself having to struggle to what that idea is, then you're trying too hard. It should be like immediately obvious. It's like the first thing that comes to your mind. Just work on those. Talk to your customers, figure out how it works different. And then as I said, kind of go back to building a tiger team, so you have an organization that can work across, silos, across different functional silos, and get your partners in the room with these people, right? Who's the platform? Get your guy from Cisco in the room with if you're in the transportation space, with a person that's doing your onboard vehicle logic unit, right? In the room with the provider of your CAD AVL application, and say, okay, guys, this is my problem. How are you going to work together to solve it? And then figure it out together. I think that's the best way to do it. And ask the tough questions. It's like, can you actually give this to me at the price that I'm willing to pay for it, right? Don't find $100 solution for a $1 problem, right? I think a lot of people make that mistake. So that's probably that basic blocking and tackling, right?
Yeah, I do. I do agree. My also favorite about the technologies and all that, but people get super excited about saving time, right? Oh, it's going to save us like 100 hours of time and all this. I'm like, yeah, and what are you going to do with this 100 hours? Do you actually have work that you can do for this extra 100 hours? So what are you actually going to do? Because it's like technology is only a tool to the bigger problem, and you need to think about those business solutions across the board, as you said, in order to find that sweet spot for the technology. So on that's all time that we have today. Thank you so much, RJ, for speaking to us today. It's always an extreme pleasure to speak with you, to hear your perspective and your perspective from the Cisco IT world. So again, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks very much again, Vlas, and look forward to collaborating with SBIC some more.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Bye.